There I was, in the thick of it, orchestrating the perfect anniversary dinner. Every dish on that table was a love letter to our years together. I'd spent days planning, turning our home into something out of a fairy tale. Friends and family toasted to our love, hanging on every word of my heartfelt speech about us, about hope. The night wrapped up with this local musician, serenading us with those tunes that were the soundtrack to our love. It was perfect, too perfect, but life has a funny way of showing you what's really underneath. Fast forward to this swanky corporate bash I had no business being at, dressed to kill. That's where Mr. Charming comes in, courtesy of a well-meaning but clueless friend. Our connection was electric, the kind of spark you read about but never really think you'll feel. We talked for hours, our lives unfolding to each other like some kind of epic novel. When we parted, it wasn't just a handshake, but a promise, a door to something forbidden yet irresistible. The affair kicked off with a frenzy, pretending it was all for work. I slipped away to meet him, our passion hidden away in some no-name hotel, our laughter echoing down streets where nobody knew us. We made vows in those hidden moments, promises as fragile as our secret. Back at home, though, the air shifted. My husband, always the detail-oriented one, started connecting dots I'd hoped he'd never even see. Those quiet, probing questions over dinner, his eyes searching mine for something I couldn't give him. Truth. It was like living on a fault line, waiting for the quake. Then came the showdown, a quiet storm. He laid out his evidence. Those credit card statements like a trail of breadcrumbs leading straight to my guilt. I tried, really tried, to weave some tale, to patch the gaping holes in my story. But lies, they have a weight. You know? He suggested counseling, a lifeline I wasn't sure I wanted to grab. We were two people, worlds apart in that moment, the space between us filled with doubt and unspoken hurt. But the heart wants what it wants, my lover and I. We threw caution to the wind, our secret meetings not so secret anymore. Gifts, dinners, whispers of a future together. It was intoxicating, until it wasn't. That gnawing guilt, the fear of getting caught. It was a shadow, always there. The final blow wasn't a surprise, not really. My husband, with his quiet determination, had sought the truth and found it, laid bare by a stranger with a camera. Those photos, they didn't just capture moments. They shattered everything. The confrontation that followed was a reckoning. His pain, my shame, our life together up in smoke. Lying awake at 3 a.m., the room's silence feels like it's screaming at me. My mind's a battlefield, part tugging me one way, guilt and duty yanking me another. It's been nights like this, tossing and turning, wrestling with the mess I've got myself into. Love, or whatever this chaos is, it's got me thinking about leaving everything I've known. So I do what any desperate soul would. I call up my bestie, hoping she's got the magic words. But after hours of pouring my heart out, all I get is "It's your call, girl." Great. Back to square one with a side of extra confusion. In a moment that feels like clarity, or maybe just sheer madness, I write this letter to my husband. It's raw. All my feelings spilled out on paper. A letter I never planned to send. But it feels good, you know? Like I'm finally admitting it to myself. Then I start packing a suitcase in secret, a small bag that feels like I'm packing up my entire life. The decision feels like a punch to the gut. I'm leaving. I convince myself it's love, that what I feel for this other guy is the real deal. It's a decision that lights a fuse, setting off a chain of events I'm nowhere near ready for. Meeting my lover. I'm a bundle of nerves, heart racing with hope and fear. I'm leaving him for us, I say, expecting, I don't know, fireworks? Instead I get panic, a cold splash of reality, as he admits this was never meant to be more than a fling. My world crumbles right there. All my dreams turning to dust. Then comes the bombshell from my husband. He's found out, his face a mix of hurt and anger I've never seen before. The ultimatum is brutal, end it or it's over. Standing there, shattered by my lover's rejection, I realize the depth of the hole I've dug for myself. Trying to plead my case feels like trying to hold on to water. Futile. In desperation, I reach out to my lover, hoping he'd see sense. But I'm met with a wall of silence, blocked, ignored. My pleas for understanding are just echoes in a void. It's rejection in its coldest form, leaving me reeling, alone with nowhere to turn. My husband's patience runs out. I come home to find my life packed up in boxes outside our house. My belongings a silent testament to the end of my marriage. It's a physical exile that mirrors the emotional one I've already been feeling. He's firm, but broken. And I'm just lost. I call a friend, my voice shaking as I ask for shelter. She agrees, but the reluctance in her voice is a punch to the gut. Moving into her spare room, I'm surrounded by walls that feel like they're closing in on me. My presence an unwelcome reminder of the chaos I've caused. As the scandal breaks, whispers turn to shouts, social media to a battleground. Friends become strangers overnight, their looks a mix of pity and scorn. My world shrinks to a room in a friend's house. My once vibrant social life now just memories and what-ifs. Just when you think you've hit rock bottom, life hands you a shovel and tells you to keep digging. That's me, digging my way through the mess I've made. Starting with job hunting like it's an Olympic sport. My resume's getting more action than I am, constantly tweaking it for jobs I'm overqualified for or completely clueless about. Amid the chaos, a light bulb moment. Why not turn this crisis into a launchpad for my own business? Easier said than done, but desperation breeds creativity, right? Networking events become my new hangout, swapping wine for business cards, trying to schmooze my way into opportunities. And then there's the blog, a mix of catharsis and PR spin telling my side without spilling too much tea. Legal advice is next on my checklist. Wrongful termination has a nice ring to it, but the legal jargon's a headache I'm not ready for. Flip the script to the home front. My soon-to-be ex is lawyering up like we're in a primetime legal drama. He's collecting evidence like it's going out of style, aiming to paint me as the villain in our marital collapse. I'm scrambling for a decent lawyer, someone who doesn't charge their weight in gold, but can still pack a punch in court. As for friends, they're becoming as scarce as my job prospects, taking sides in a battle I never wanted to fight. Downward spiral? More like a nosedive. Job applications are my daily dose of rejection, pushing me towards considering a career makeover. Support groups and therapy sessions fill the gaps between job hunts and legal battles, offering a glimmer of sanity. Selling off my stuff feels like I'm auctioning off bits of my life. But hey, a girl's gotta eat. Volunteering's the only thing making me feel like I'm not a total lost cause. A chance to sprinkle some good karma in the mess of my life. Then there's that first awkward encounter with my husband post-split. Picture this, a room full of people, and there I am, getting the cold shoulder as if I'm contagious. Humiliation doesn't begin to cover it. Thank God for friends who still believe in me, offering a shoulder and some much-needed encouragement. Their support becomes my lifeline, pulling me back from the edge of giving up. Enter the mysterious stranger, because apparently my life's now a spy novel. He's all cryptic warnings and hidden agendas, dangling information like a carrot I can't help but chase. The sealed envelope feels like something out of a movie, promising answers but only raising more questions. His talk of discretion and danger sends a chill down my spine, but the thrill of uncovering the truth is too tempting to ignore. So what do? Sign a non-disclosure agreement with a man whose name I don't even know, because that's the kind of decision-making prowess I'm working with. The burner phone he hands me feels like a ticking bomb. Each task he assigns pulling me deeper into a world I never wanted a part of. But with each step, I'm getting closer to something, maybe not redemption, but at least a chance to fight back. The grand finale of my descent into espionage involves breaking into my former lover's company, because at this point, why not? With a little help from my tech-savvy friend, every heroine needs one. I'm in and out like a ghost, the sensitive information in hand. I'm crafting a narrative where I'm not just the victim or the villain, but the architect of my own comeback story. There I was, heart pounding like it wanted out, all dolled up in a getup that screamed, I totally belong here at some swanky corporate shindig. My mission? Play spy for a night. Think less James Bond, more desperate housewife with a tech-savvy twist, armed with a fake ID that wouldn't fool a toddler, and a hidden camera disguised as a designer necklace. I was ready to dive headfirst into the lion's den. The crowd was a blur of tailored suits and fake smiles, each one of them clueless about the drama they were about to star in. I flitted from group to group, throwing around small talk like confetti, all while my hidden camera was catching every shady deal and whispered secret. Hacking into that private meeting was a piece to resistance, my fingers dancing over my phone like it was Beethoven's piano. And just for the cherry on top, I left behind a digital time bomb. An email set to deliver all this juicy info straight to my mysterious contact. Next up, the great server room heist. Picture this, me tiptoeing down a corridor straight out of a spy movie, dodging security like I'm in a game of human Frogger. The lock on the server room door didn't stand a chance against my makeshift gadgetry. Data copied, thumb drive tucked away, and me making my grand escape with an adrenaline rush that could light up Vegas. But here's where the plot thickens. Turns out my mysterious benefactor was playing me like a fiddle in his own orchestra of corporate warfare. That clandestine exchange felt straight out of a thriller, until he dropped the bombshell about his real employer. There I was, a pawn in a game I didn't even know I was playing, feeling the stings of betrayal sharper than a slap in the face. Watching the fallout was like observing a car crash in slow motion. You want to look away, but you just can't. My handiwork sent the lovers' company into a tailspin, share prices taking faster than you can say scandal. And as he stood there at that press conference, trying to salvage what was left, I couldn't help but feel a twisted mix of victory and remorse. Retaliation wasn't long coming. The lover, that charming snake, finally pieced it all together and came at me with a fury I hadn't seen coming. His threats were cloaked in civility, but the message was crystal clear. I was in the crosshairs now, and he was pulling the trigger. The threats started small, almost laughable. Anonymous emails, strange cars loitering a bit too long. But then came the package, a silent messenger of danger, leaving me chilled to the bone. My digital life turned into a battlefield overnight, every notification a potential grenade. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for the gauntlet of shame I'd walk at that public event. Old colleagues, their eyes burning with blame, their words sharp as knives, cutting me down for all to hear. The whispers, the stares. It was a walk of shame on a scale I'd never imagined. Slinking away from that debacle, I couldn't help but wonder, was it all worth it? Every sneaky move, every lie, every moment of thrill, it all came crashing down, leaving me to pick up the pieces of a life I barely recognized. As I wandered back into the shadows, the weight of my choices hung heavy on my shoulders, a constant reminder of the price of playing a game I never truly understood. Opening my door to find a guy with a clipboard and a sorry just doing my job look should have been my first clue that the day was about to nosedive. He hands me an envelope that feels like it weighs a ton. Lawsuit paperwork. My name, big and bold on the front, accusing me of espionage and theft. My heart's racing like I've run a marathon, and all I've done is stand here. First call? My lawyer. What the hell does this mean? I'm pacing, paper crackling like a bonfire with every step. He's calm. Too calm. Gather anything you have. We'll refute this. But as I dig through emails and texts, a sinking feeling tells me I'm in over my head. I dial my lover next, anger giving my voice a sharp edge. Why am I being sued? His silence speaks volumes, followed by a string of excuses that might as well be static. I hang up, feeling betrayed all over again. The night's a blur of legal jargon and worst-case scenarios playing in my head. Morning brings no relief. Trying to log into my bank account and getting an error message? That's panic in digital form. I'm throwing clothes into a suitcase like they're life rafts. Phone calls to friends, each one more desperate than the last. I just need somewhere to crash, a little cash to get by. It's humbling, this scramble for help, then the credit card decline, the cherry on top of my disaster Sunday. My solution? Selling anything that isn't nailed down. It's bargaining for survival, and pride's the first casualty. The final blow? A call to a relative, voice shaky, asking for refuge. But escape isn't in the cards. A parking lot becomes my personal horror movie set, cornered by faces that might as well be masks of my lover's betrayal. Their warning is clear. Stay in line or else. They leave with my cash, and I'm left with a pounding heart and a head full of fear. Shelters become my new normal. It's a world away from the life I knew. Each day blending into the next, a cycle of survival and reflection. I find solace in shared stories, the camaraderie of those with nothing left to lose. Volunteering gives me a sliver of purpose, a reminder that even at rock bottom, I can still give something back. Then the call that breaks the camel's back, a friend's confession, coerced by my husband into betrayal. There hurts a physical thing, a gut punch that says, "You're on your own." Cutting ties is my only move, a step towards reclaiming my autonomy. My last-ditch effort, a letter to my husband, words bleeding onto the page. I wait outside his fortress of solitude, part in my throat. His rejection is cold, clinical. There's nothing left to say. It's a door slammed shut, the finality echoing long after he's gone. Court feels like a theater, and I'm the understudy thrown into the lead role without a script. My defense is passionate, but falls on deaf ears. The judge's verdict a gavel to my hopes. But defeat? It's just a state of mind. I'm down but not out. Confronting my lover one last time. I seek the closure I know deep down won't come. His words are a knife, twisting with every lie. Walking away, there's a weight lifted. I'm free from the illusion of us, ready to face whatever comes next with the strength forged in the fires of my trials. This chapter of my life, it's one I'm ready to close, a story of loss, betrayal, and survival. But most importantly, it's about finding the resilience to start anew, to rebuild from the ashes of my past. Right? So imagine this. One day you're living what you think is your happily ever after, and the next, you're slapped with the cold hard truth that it's all just a fairy tale gone wrong. That's me, standing there, holding a piece of paper that might as well be a bomb. The court's decision? Not in my favor. Losing custody felt like they decided I was unfit to be a mom. Me, the one who'd read every parenting book cover to cover. I wasn't going down without a fight, though. I called up every lawyer in town, but each conversation left me feeling more desperate. And the hubby? Let's just say our chats weren't exactly heart-to-hearts, more like shouting matches filled with blame and what-ifs. Trying to see my kids and getting the door slammed in my face was the cherry on top of my nightmare Sunday. That's when the darkness crept in, a deep, suffocating fog of sadness I couldn't shake off. Isolation became my new best friend. Days blurred into nights. My phone turned into a brick, ignored, silent. In a fit of rage, I trashed every photo, every memento. It was like trying to erase a life that once was. But the pain? That wasn't going anywhere. I teetered on the edge, thinking maybe, just maybe, there was an easy way out. Yet something stopped me. Instead, I found myself sitting in a circle of strangers at a support group, clinging to their stories like lifelines. Just when I thought things couldn't get weirder, he shows up. Mr. Mysterious with his cryptic hints and too good to be true solutions. Standing on my doorstep with a smirk, offering me a way out that reeked of trouble. Temptation gnawed at me, but something about his eyes said, "Run." I slammed the door, buying time to wrestle with the moral maze he'd thrown me into. My gut won. I couldn't do it. Couldn't dive deeper into the muck for a quick fix. I met him again, this time with a hidden recorder. "I'm not your pawn," I told him, hoping my voice sounded steadier than I felt. His threat sent chills down my spine, but I stood my ground. I was done making deals with devils. That's when life decided I needed even more excitement. Shadows tailing me, my car suddenly having a mind of its own, and my once safe haven bugged. Paranoid? Maybe. But when someone tries to run you off the road, you stop questioning your sanity. A PI confirmed my fears. It all led back to my ex-lover. Fantastic. In the midst of dodging physical and emotional bullets, I took a hard look in the mirror. It wasn't pretty. The counseling, the awkward calls to friends I'd ghosted, the realization that I'd played a starring role in my own downfall. It all hurt. But there was no magic rewind button. This was my mess to clean up. So I vanished, deleted my online life, ditched my old number, and moved to a place where nobody knew my name. My world shrunk to the size of a garden patch, and the pages of books, the only friends I could trust not to stab me in the back. Loneliness? Sure. But it beat lying awake at night wondering who'd betray me next. Job hunting was a joke. Overqualified, or not enough recent experience. Take your pick. But I hustled, juggling gigs that paid in pennies and pride. Night classes became my Friday night party, each new skill a tiny victory. Just when I dared to hope I might crawl out of this hole, he found me again. Not the ex-husband this time, but the lover turned stalker, his parting gift a trail of breadcrumbs leading right to my door. Confronting him was like arguing with a brick wall, only less satisfying. He didn't budge, and I walked away knowing I'd lost more than just the argument. That's when I knew I had to disappear for real. No half measures, no looking back. I packed my life into a backpack and slipped away under the cover of darkness. Bound for Sarah flicked through a travel magazine, a restlessness gnawing at her. The images weren't just pictures anymore. They were an escape. Lush rainforests dripped with a vibrancy her everyday life lacked, the promise of exotic flavors and unknown adventures whispered from every glossy page. She wanted this, needed it. But Mark, bless his practical socks, would balk at the cost, the disruption to their carefully constructed schedule. A bit out of our price range, wouldn't you say, love? Mark startled her out of her reverie. His tone wasn't mean, just rooted in their reality of mortgages and sensible savings plans. Maybe a weekend camping trip sometime? We could do that. Camping, Sarah shuddered inwardly. It wasn't him, just all that beige sensibleness he seemed to embody. Successful, steady, reliable, and predictable to the point of suffocating her. The gym was usually mindless reps in the dull hum of pop songs on repeat. But today, he was there. New, a burst of energy that cut through the monotony. Lean and toned, his laugh was uninhibited, contrasting so sharply with Mark's quiet chuckle. When their eyes met, there was an instant magnetism, a promise of something different, something she couldn't quite name. Alex, he'd said, and the way he lingered on her name sent a thrill through her. The gym became a secret stage, fueled by stolen glances and quick exchanges. He noticed the Bali magazine under her arm one day. Always dreamed of going there, she confessed, surprised at her own boldness. We should. His response was immediate, his voice low and conspiratorial. Make that dream a hell of a reality. The lie blossomed over restless nights and texts buzzing beneath the table while Mark talked about his workday. Girls trick to Cancun, she told him, the words slipping out far too easily. A girl's trip was something he could accept, something he wouldn't question, and that thrill of deceit, of creating her own escape with Alex, was exhilarating. It took a week of choreography to secure time off from work, a cover story about a friend needing a break. The day her bags were packed, Sarah wasn't just leaving, she was breaking free. Bali was sensory overload. The air itself, thick with the scent of frangipani and incense, felt heady compared to the sterile familiarity of home. Alex at her side was a constant current of energy. He led her down winding market lanes filled with spices and colors she'd never imagined, coaxed her into bargaining duels with smiling vendors, and somehow got her to try durian despite the gag-inducing smell. It was terrifying, exhilarating, everything her life wasn't. Fingers tangled together under the table in quiet beachside restaurants. The unspoken secret, a constant buzz between them. Stolen afternoons and hidden coves, his touch a revelation. Her guilt a nagging mosquito, she swatted away with defiant sips of her cocktail. This wasn't just a holiday, it was a reawakening. What'll you tell Mark? Alex asked one twilight. His voice, usually full of laughter, had an edge. Girl stuff. He doesn't ask much. But deep down, a kernel of panic was taking root. Back home, the lies felt heavier. The lingering scent of Bali followed her, a ghost of the woman she'd become. Every time she touched Mark, even just a casual brush, her skin crawled with guilt and a traitorous thrill. He wasn't stupid, the way he lingered over her Bali photos, a tightness in his jaw that wasn't there before, screamed it. Had a good time? The question was so neutral, she almost missed the undercurrent. Wonderful, she chirped, stacking photos on the table. You should really see these markets. Did you miss me? He cut her off, quiet and lethal. He knew. Some part of her, maybe the coward, was weirdly relieved. It meant the pretending could stop. But the other part, the one hooked on Bali and Alex's intensity, screamed in protest. This was a mess, but a mess she created. She had to own it now, whatever that meant. Sarah was playing with fire, and she knew it. The thrill of meeting Alex had lost its shine, replaced by a frantic need to keep her secret. Lunch hour became a game of hide and seek, ducking into that dingy cafe near the office, her heart a frantic drum in her chest. The risk made his kisses hotter, his touch more forbidden, but it was starting to feel like a noose tightening around her neck. He'd call her at work now, low and insistent, ignoring her hissed pleas to stop. His presence seeped into her office, a ghost that only she could see. Nights were worse. Mark's snoring hadn't bothered her for years, but now it was a soundtrack to her guilt-riddled insomnia. She'd text Alex under the covers, the blue glow of her phone a dangerous beacon. Then she'd lie awake with shaking hands until dawn washed over her, feeling hollow and desperate. She'd started taking long, scalding hot showers hoping to wash the traces of Alex off her skin. Alex wanted more. No more Bali escapes, no more snatched moments between meetings. He wanted her. All of her. The texts grew harsher, the thread of exposure weaving through every whispered, "I love you." His patience was wearing thin. The time for playing games was over. "Pick a side," he'd hissed during one of their lunch dates. "Or I will." The words echoed in her head, a terrifying ultimatum. Then Mark found it, the earring. It must have slipped off in their bed. An impossibly tiny bit of glittering evidence that felt like a bomb in her meticulously constructed house of lies. "Sarah." His voice was eerily calm, the earring dangling from his fingers. That's not mine. I would never." The words trailed off, useless against his quiet gaze. He didn't yell, didn't accuse, but the silence screamed the truth louder than any dramatic outburst ever could. The ground seemed to tilt beneath her feet. This wasn't just an affair, it was a wrecking ball, and everything she built with Mark was about to come crashing down around her. Mark changed overnight. The quiet simmering she'd sensed morphed into a glacier, remote, untouchable. Business dinners stretched into late nights, and his usual curt explanations were replaced by silences that throbbed louder than any accusation. The few times he did speak, his words dripped with an icy contempt that cut deeper than shouting ever could. Fear gnawed at her from the inside out, a constant dread of what he was planning, what he knew. The envelope landed in the middle of the breakfast table like a declaration of war. Inside weren't legal documents, nothing official yet. Photos, glossy snapshots of herself with Alex, laughing in a restaurant she told Mark she couldn't make, kissing beneath swaying palms on a beach that should have been hers and her husband's alone. It was all there, every lie ripped open for the world to see. Every careless moment, every whispered endearment was now evidence of her betrayal. Well, his voice cut like a wick crack, and she realized she'd been staring at the photos too long. This wasn't a civilized negotiation. This was brutal warfare. She opened her mouth, a torrent of excuses and apologies ready to unleash, but it all died as soon as it formed. There was no use. She couldn't spin stories to counter these stark images. No way to explain away the laughter in her eyes, the way she leaned into Alex's touch. So she just nodded, a pitiful admission of guilt hanging between them like a funeral shroud. "Please, Mark, we can work through this. I love you," she pleaded, voice barely a whisper. Her pride was in tatters. There was nothing else left. No clever arguments, just this desperate, raw truth she'd ignored for too long. He laughed, a cruel sound filled with a bitterness she didn't recognize. "Funny, Sarah. Seems I wasn't the only one who got bored." The next photo dropped from his hand. It was a woman, young and pretty in the way that Sarah suddenly felt old and brittle. She wasn't laughing with Mark, she was nestled against his side, her possessive hand resting on his thigh. Sarah realized with a sickening lurch that this wasn't a photo grabbed in a moment of weakness. This woman was familiar. Someone Mark had been seeing for a while. "Guess we were both looking for an escape, right?" The words were pure venom, twisting inside her, turning the guilt into a rage she'd never felt before. Her own betrayal, thrown back in her face. It wasn't forgiveness he wanted. It was a pound of flesh. His revenge was cold, calculated, and far more brutal than anything she'd ever imagined. Sarah stared at the photo of Mark's new woman. An icy knot of humiliation tightened low in her stomach. twisting with a painful intensity that rivaled the guilt. Here was her betrayal reflected back, not as a confession to atone for, but as another weapon wielded in this devastating game of revenge. Mark had found his escape, and her own reckless search for thrills seemed even more pathetic in comparison. Turns out I wasn't so predictable after all, was I? Mark's words, filled with quiet satisfaction, clawed at her. This pain, this wretched humiliation, was something she'd inflicted not only on herself, but on the man she had sworn to love. She'd broken them both, shattered something that no amount of begging could ever fix. That night, the house, their house, was suffocating. Every shared memory screamed out from the two pristine surfaces, mocking her ruined dream of a happy marriage. It reeked of hypocrisy, of lies. Mark slept soundly on his side of the bed, a stranger with a heart now locked firmly against her. Alex. He was the only one who, well, she wasn't sure what Alex was anymore, but in her fractured world, he felt like the last shred of something resembling comfort. She reached for her phone, a lifeline thrown towards her own self-destruction. "It's over," she choked out, hot tears sliding down her face. Well, not so fun when the shoe's on the other foot." Alex's laughter crackled through the speaker, harsh and uncaring. "You should have thought of that. Please, just." She wanted to explain, to apologize, to somehow bridge this yawning chasm of loneliness. "You want love, sweetheart? That'll cost you." His voice dropped low, a slithery promise that sent shivers of revulsion down her spine. With a shaking hand, she hung up. Even he, the instigator of her downfall, wanted nothing more than to exploit her misery. The foundation of their affair, built on lies and stolen moments, crumbled into dust. Sarah was alone, truly, utterly alone. She finally understood the true price of her betrayal. The single suitcase felt both too heavy and not nearly enough as she stood in the doorway. Looking back, the hollow shell of a home blurred with the image of Mark's icy smile and the glossy photo of his new lover. This wasn't just an escape she needed, this was exile. Mark's lawyer was a shark, smooth, dressed in a suit that screamed of money Sarah had once freely spent, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He spoke of asset allocation, prenuptial agreements, and something called infidelity clauses. Sarah's head spun. Turns out, her lies had cost her more than her marriage. Years of building a life together whittled down to a few cold signatures. The house went to Mark. The savings account she thought was safely hers evaporated. Even the damn dog was technically listed as his property. The apartment she managed to snag felt foreign. It was beige, cramped, and echoed with the silence of being truly alone. Days blurred into one another as she picked at leftovers. The motivation to cook as gone as her appetite. She'd flinch at the sound of her phone. Every ring a potential bill collector. Every unknown number a reminder that her world had narrowed to a point of suffocating solitude. Even her bed, previously a sanctuary, was now just a stark reminder of empty space beside her. The yoga studio where she'd once giggled with friends now felt hostile. The pity in their eyes was far worse than any judgment. It whispered from the forced smiles, the too loud offers of coffee that never materialized. Every glance felt heavy with the weight of the gossip she was sure was swirling like vultures overhead. Sometimes, she'd linger after class, hoping someone, anyone, would approach. But the moment the instructor finished her final mantras, the room emptied like everyone was desperate to get away from her. It was in the grocery store, of all places, that the whispers took form. Two women, voices sharp enough to cut through the canned music, giggled cruelly about some poor woman caught with a younger man. The details were vague enough, but the sneer, the way they called her stupid and desperate, well, that was crystal clear. Alex had talked. He'd spun lies to make himself the victim, and like wildfire, the rumors had spread. His parting gift, delivered via faceless strangers. She abandoned her cart, a wave of nausea washing over her. There was nowhere to hide, no escape from the fallout of her actions. The loneliness wasn't just the quiet of her empty apartment. It was the knowledge that Mark's revenge had been far crueler than any legal document. He'd ripped away her reputation, poisoned her against rebuilding any semblance of the life she'd lost. This, it seemed, was the final sting and a punishment she brought upon herself, a lifetime sentence of isolation. Sarah found solace in the generic anonymity of a chain coffee shop, bland, beige, and populated by people too engrossed in their phones or too numb from their daily grind to notice her. It was far from the trendy cafes she'd frequented with Mark, but here, at least, no one would whisper behind well-manicured hands. Her cappuccino sat untouched, growing cold as Sarah zoned out. The world existed a safe distance away, muffled and slightly out of focus, exactly how she needed it right now. But a ripple of awareness broke through when a woman sat down at the table across from her. There was something vaguely familiar, even under the two bright lights and the harsh angles they cast on the woman's face. Her eyes, those were the giveaway, large, dark, ringed with a sadness that mirrored Sarah's own. It was the same haunted look she saw in the bathroom mirror every morning. The look that never truly faded even if she plastered on a forced smile for the grocery store cashier. You don't have to order anything. Just needed someone. The woman's voice was a shaky whisper, the words tumbling out in a rush. Sarah realized this cafe wasn't anonymity. It was neutral ground for two broken souls. Me too, she offered up, surprised at her own admission. Their shared look needed no further explanation. It wove a tapestry of loss, pain, of broken trust stitched together with a thread of bitter recognition. Sarah couldn't fathom any small talk, couldn't offer empty platitudes of, "It'll get better," when she hadn't experienced that herself. It took a few beats for the woman to blink, her hand fiddling with her coffee stirrer. "It's the eyes. Everyone keeps looking away." The simplicity of the statement was heartbreaking. Mark had cut deep with his meticulously planned revenge. Sarah finally met those haunted eyes straight on. "You're Sarah, right?" The one Mark left for. The woman's name, Lisa, hovered just out of reach. No denial, just a flicker of resignation before a small, humorless laugh escaped her lips. "Yeah, me. Turns out fairy tales don't always end in Prince Charming, huh?" A wave of something Sarah couldn't quite define washed over her. Not sympathy, not anger, but a strange prickle of pity. This woman. She'd been ensnared in Mark's web of revenge, an unfortunate pawn in his carefully crafted game. Sarah, for all her faults, had at least known what she was getting into with Alex. Lisa had likely been blinded by love, seduced into an escape that was just another, crueler trap. The news flash on the TV above the counter shattered the heavy silence. A slick businessman, all sharp suits and practiced smiles, was plastered under the headline, "Fraud Investigation." As that, Sarah trailed off, a jolt of dread shooting through her. Lisa looked up, and the blood drained from her face. "Oh God, that's Alex. They finally caught him." Alex's face kept popping up on the news. Women, several of them, were stepping out of shadows, their stories echoing Sarah's own in chilling detail. Seduction, hollow promises, and the threat of exposure when the thrill wore off. He'd spun a web of deceit, using affairs as weapons for financial gain. Sarah watched with a strange detachment as his carefully constructed image crumbled. This wasn't justice, not really, but it was something like vindication, proof that he was the monster, not her. The guilt, always simmering under the surface, became a little less suffocating. She'd been stupid, reckless, but never intentionally cruel. Alex had been a predator, and for all the damage Mark had inflicted on her, there was a small, stubborn flicker of satisfaction that his revenge scheme was also backfiring. Her phone buzzed, that damn unknown number again. Mark. She hesitated. Every exchange with him lately had been barbed, filled with the echo of what they'd done to each other. But Lisa's haunted face haunted her. The thought of her falling prey to the same kind of manipulation that had devastated Sarah was unbearable. The text was clicked, devoid of his usual veiled threats. "Lisa needs to know about Alex. Can you meet her?" There was a desperation in his tone that jolted her, a stark contrast to the composed, controlled Mark she'd known. The meeting with Lisa was stilted, awkward. They circled each other like wary animals, the cafe buzzing around them. But when Sarah spoke, outlining Alex's pattern of emotional blackmail, It was like a weight lifted from Lisa's shoulders. Not disbelief, just a bone-deep weariness that mirrored Sarah's own. What do you want me to do? File charges? Drag all this out? Lisa's voice was dull, devoid of any youthful sparkle it might have once held. No, just leave. Don't give him another chance to ruin you too. Sarah wanted to offer more, some flicker of hope that it would get better. But those words rang hollow even in her own ears. And she did leave. A few days later, Mark texted with a terse, "She's gone." Just like that, another ruined fairy tale. Another casualty of Mark's bitter game of vengeance. Sarah wasn't sure if she'd saved Lisa from heartbreak, but the thought that she prevented further manipulation, further destruction, eased the guilt clawing at her just a fraction. Mark reached out again, not an accusation, not another threat, but something resembling an apology, a tired, defeated admission that his plan might have backfired, leaving him lonelier than even Sarah's betrayal had. There was no request for forgiveness, no expectation of it, just an acknowledgement of the wasteland they both played a part in creating. It was the furthest thing from a happy ending.